The other day, my husband and I were trying to leave for church, but it was storming so badly we couldn't. The pounding rain and fierce wind made it too dangerous to even walk outside. All we could do was sit and wait for the storm to let up enough so that we could carry on as planned. For the moment, though, we were stopped in our tracks. Storms will do that. As the Oxford Dictionary says, a storm is a violent disturbance of the atmosphere with strong winds and usually rain, thunder, lightning, or snow. I'm sure we've all faced some kind of storm in life, some violent disturbance that throws everything upside down, like the loss of a job, home, or loved one, a difficult medical diagnosis, an accident, a broken relationship. There's so many different situations we could classify as storms. So many situations that can bring fear, anxiety, helplessness, confusion, anger, depression, overwhelming uncertainty, and more. In the middle of these storms, despite our circumstances, we can have peace. And I've actually already done a video called Peace in the Storm. But if you're anything like me, you might struggle with why God even allows the storm to start with. Yes, God will absolutely give us peace that passes all understanding as a violent storm rages around us. But if He loves us so much, why even allow the storm to start with? Let's look at a literal storm involving Jesus and his disciples. Jesus had just performed an amazing miracle, the feeding of the 5,000. That evening, he sent the disciples ahead of him across the Sea of Galilee, while he stayed behind to dismiss the crowd and then spend some time alone in prayer. Then, while it is still dark, while they are in the middle of the lake, in a boat, without Jesus, the disciples are hit by a storm, bringing lots of wind and very rough waters. The boat is being battered by the waves, and the disciples were working as hard as they could to control the boat. So now we pick up the story in Matthew 14:25 through 29, which says, "And in the fourth watch of the night," which would have been 3 to 6 a.m., he, referring to Jesus, came to them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter responded and said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. A few different miracles occur in this story. First of all, we see Jesus walking on water, which is amazing enough. But then we see Peter walking on water too. Incredible. Can you imagine? Obviously, God's power is on display here. But then what happens? Picking back up in verse 30, it says, "But seeing the wind, he," referring to Peter, "became frightened. And when he began to sink, he cried out, saying, 'Lord, save me.' Immediately Jesus reached out with his hand and took hold of him and said to him, 'You of little faith, why did you doubt?' When they got into the boat, the wind stopped." Peter is experiencing this amazing miracle, this unbelievable experience. But then he takes his eyes off Jesus and his power, the power Peter needs to be able to walk on water, and looks at the wind, and at that moment begins to sink. It is interesting to me that Jesus does not calm the storm until they are in the boat. Peter walks on the water, gets scared, and starts to sink. But Jesus doesn't calm the storm until Peter has experienced a terrifying situation. But all this could have been avoided. Jesus could have calmed the storm the moment Peter stepped out of the boat, or the moment he became frightened, or the moment he began to sink. Why didn't he? It would have saved Peter from a terrifying experience. And why doesn't God do this for us? Why doesn't he save us from having to go through difficulties and trials? Maybe because, as pastor and writer Paul W. Powell put it, God is more concerned about our character than our comfort. His goal is not to pamper us physically, but to perfect us spiritually. And I think we see this in James 1 2 through 4, which says, "Consider it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." The Greek word for trials here is parasmas. Vine's dictionary says they are trials with a beneficial purpose and effect, divinely permitted or sent. Verse 3 refers to these trials as the testing of our faith. Last year, my husband and I went to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, crossing over the Mackinac Bridge, which is about 5 miles long. The main towers are over 550 feet tall, and in the middle of the bridge, you are driving about 200 feet above the water. It's a massive structure that can be somewhat intimidating. One comforting aspect for the travelers of that bridge is knowing that the integrity of that bridge is evaluated annually. A bridge failure can be catastrophic, so it's necessary to assess them periodically. ASCE.org says that civil engineers must conduct regular assessments of bridge elements to establish conditions and then address critical defects to preserve the safety and integrity of bridges. So, periodically, engineers assess the condition of the bridges. They test the bridges to see if there are any critical defects that need to be addressed before anything catastrophic occurs. According to McKissick.com, there are several ways bridges are tested, like visual inspection, looking for visible signs of damage, or many state-of-the-art techniques like X-rays and radar, and also load testing, which they say simulates stress on the bridge to ensure it can handle expected traffic loads. Load testing identifies deformations and strains under a given load condition. These trials we face, the testing of our faith, does some similar things for us. It may show the strength of our faith to ourselves and others, show that we really do trust Him, or it may show some critical defects that need to be corrected. Verses 3 and 4 tell us some beneficial consequences of this testing of our faith. James says, "Knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." The testing of your faith produces endurance, patience, steadfastness, constancy. And then it says, "Let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." These three things actually all have similar meanings: perfect, complete, and lacking in nothing. The Greek word translated as perfect is teleos. Thayer says this word means brought to its end, finished, lacking nothing necessary to completeness, perfect. GotQuestions.org says this word conveys a sense of maturity, completeness, or attaining a goal. In this context, the goal is to meet God's standard, not simply settle for human morality. A follower of Christ cannot take an attitude of, "I'm good enough." The second word, halakleros, which we translate as complete, is a synonym of teleos, which according to Thayer means complete in all its parts, in no part lacking or unsound, complete, entire, whole. Perfect, complete, lacking nothing. So we need these storms, these trials, this testing of our faith in order to grow and mature, to develop our character, to be complete in all our parts, so we will be lacking nothing, to get us closer to the goal of being like Christ. God knows that it is more important for us to become like Christ than to be comfortable. He doesn't always take away our difficulties, trials, pain, and discomfort, because we need these things to grow spiritually. Storms are an opportunity for us to grow and mature spiritually, and they are also an opportunity to see God's power, an opportunity to get to know Him better. As Corrie ten Boom said, in order to realize the worth of the anchor, we need to feel the stress of the storm. I'll close with these words of Peter from 1 Peter 1 6 and 7. The same Peter that knows what it is like to be sinking in the middle of a raging storm. He said, "In this you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by various trials, so that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold, which perishes though tested by fire, may be found to result in praise, glory, and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ."